Today's topic of discussion is bits and what they do to the horse. Because obviously with polo, one is looking to find a horse with a sensitive mouth that you can stop, especially at high speeds. Two types of bit. There's a pelham bit or pelham type bit that has a curb chain and a shank. And there is a gag type bit which has either a rope running through it but works on pole pressure and the bit moving up in the horse's mouth. Now, most horses will respond, if they're going to play polo, to one of those two types of bits. But the problem is this, that if a horse has been traditionally played in a gag and is losing sensitivity in the mouth, one can then try and use a pelham just to sharpen it up, for example, and vice versa. Old traditional type pelham has got either a straight bar or a very small port. That does not allow a horse's tongue to lie underneath it. And any tongue sensitive horse is going to try and pull its tongue back from that and put it over the bit to find comfort for the tongue. That comes with its own problems in that the tongue is now no longer a cushion for the bit to keep it off the gum, what we call the bars. So as it goes over, this goes straight onto the bars of the horse. And if one is not very careful, what you find when you're riding the horse is a horse that is hugely oversensitive because this is lying directly on the gum with no cushion. And then what happens is as you use it, it starts to make big cuts on that gum and you find big wounds. And the horse then goes numb from the pain and starts to bleed. One of the ways of solving that problem is a bit such as this, which you can see has a very high port where the tongue is much less involved with the tongue pressure. There's a lot of room for the tongue underneath there because the port is higher, and for tongue sensitive horses that is very, very important. Now also with this bit you can see that we put a spinner on it, okay, so that when the horse's tongue lies underneath it like this, when it tries to pull its tongue back to do that, it blocks the mouth. One might have to, if a horse really gets its mouth open and can get its tongue over that, to put a drop noseband with this so that it prevents the horse opening its mouth that wide, and in that way the horse can never get its tongue over the bit. And you've always then got the cushion of the tongue making sure that that horse doesn't cut on the gums, on the bars. With the gag, you often have the same problems with the horse putting its tongue over the bit. The problems are not as bad on the bars because it is a jointed bit. We have manufactured a bit where it is jointed and we have that same spinner on the bit to try and prevent that tongue going over. So there is a real way of fixing that problem. The other way of fixing it is not to use a spinner, but to use a gag that is also ported. You can see that that has got a very nice high port in it, and a lot of horses are responding very well to this bit that have tongue sensitivity because it gives the tongue underneath here a lot of room to move without having tongue pressure on it.
Here's a very good example of a very tongue sensitive filly, and you can see that every time pressure is put on the reins, she immediately pulls her tongue back in her mouth and puts it over the bit. The bit is now not cushioned by the tongue, and you can see the violence of her reaction because that hurts. There is a very good still picture showing the tongue over and the bit on the bars. Here you can see her a few minutes later with the ported gag I showed you in her mouth, and you can see the tongue under the bit. The reaction is not perfect yet because this has become a habit, but it's far less violent and will improve with time.
The other thing that one can pay attention to is the pole pressure. Now, a traditional gag with the rope running through has only one setting. When you pull that bit is going to go up into the mouth because that rope is running through the bridle. However, if one uses a Dutch gag or 3-ring gag, then you will see that if you pull that bit high in the mouth, then the actual bit hinges much lower down the ring. So you have a lot of pull through. That works very much the same as a gag with a rope through it. If one sets it halfway, then it's a much milder gag. And again, if you set it slightly lower, the pull on the pole is much less. Now, the other thing one has to actually really focus on is that there are two different problems with a gag. One is that a gag works on pole pressure as well as the actual nutcracker action of the gag. Now, the old traditional nutcracker gag pulls the cheeks in far more than a jointed bit like this that has two joints. And one can get these with either a plate that sets the horse's head lower or this wheel that puts the horse's head up. But the point is that that nutcracker action is a lot less than one would get from the old gags with a single joint in the middle. And that nutcracker action pulls the cheek of the horse here on the outside against the top molars. So again, if one is using gags, one needs to be very careful that you have done the teeth well, that there are no hooks inside there, where when the gag pulls the cheek against the teeth, that you create cuts on the side of the mouth. What I wanted to just show you is how, when you don't do the teeth properly, you get the cuts on the inside of the cheek, and when one doesn't pay attention to the tongue over the bit, you get the cuts on the bars.
Okay.
What I'm looking at here is the original problem we talked about with the horse's tongue getting over a pelham bit. This horse wasn't stopping in a gag, so the guy that was riding it put a straight bar pelham in, and the horse has got its tongue over the bit. Now you can see, there's the cut. You can see my finger pointing at the cut there. There's the cut. And this is like 3 or 4 days old now, so it's had a chance to heal. And you can see on the cheeks themselves, there were marks there from the original gag. So that is a real problem for this horse. And if you go on using this horse, it's going to eventually really start to be a long-term problem, because the horse then starts to duck its head, it starts to throw its head up to try and get away from the pain. And all the hard work you've put into the schooling actually goes out the window, because the horse is feeling so much pain that it doesn't then respond to anything, and you've got other problems that you have to sort out. This is a horse that has cut the inside of its cheeks from the gag. Now remember that a horse's teeth grow forever, and the way that the teeth are kept short is that when a horse chews, it grinds away at the teeth. So what happens is, it's like sharpening a knife. You get sharp points on the outside of the top and sharp points on the inside of the bottom from that continuous grinding. But sometimes horses have an overbite where the teeth don't actually mesh. So if it's from the front, what one gets then is a hook growing down here that's never ground off. And that becomes like a needle that the cheek cuts against. And remember, if you've got a hook growing in the front, you've also got one growing at the back. So it's really important to pay attention to the teeth. This is a very good example of that, where you can see that the gag itself with that nutcracker has cut the corners of the mouth here. So that is in itself a problem, and the horse will react to that. And then this horse has got the overbite on the front, and you can see where that hook has actually injured the cheeks on the inside. And you can see where my finger is now pointing, the big injury starting on the inside here from that hook. So really important that you get your dentist for polo to take off that and create a proper, what we call a bit seat, where the bit is sitting, that when you pull that cheek in across the mouth there, it doesn't pull onto that protruding point. It folds around a nicely rounded tooth, and then you don't get those cuts.